Hey everyone, welcome to another episode. For this episode, I want to share some tips on how you can add color to your black and white painting. I think it can be a bit tricky in Photoshop because there's so many different ways you can go about it. So I want to share some things I find helpful and the methods I like to use, and I hope that can also help you whenever you want to add colors to your own black and white paintings or explore some different ways of how to introduce colors to it. So let's get started, shall we? So one thing before we start painting, I just want to share a scale of how far I want to push the black and white. And if you look to the left, that's the start of the painting. To the right is the final painting, and you see where the grayscales landed in the process. And it's important for me whenever I do a black and white painting, I don't want to push it all the way to the end and then add color. It's something you can totally do, but for me, I find it too difficult to introduce colors if I push the value range, adding too much dark, too much bright, too early. So I try to really limit it and at a certain point stop and then introduce colors, because I feel like my workflow gets easier that way. So with keeping that in mind, I just start blocking in a lot of big bold shapes in the image. I'm mixing between having absolute no pressure on my pen. It's just to get very big blocks of shape in there and without opacity, and I'm having some areas where I'm playing around with opacity. And the reason for that is simply to get in the big shapes early on and not worry too much about details. I'm also trying to reserve a lot of the flat shapes for the highlight areas, because I know I'm going to go in with color dodge later, so I kind of want it to be a pretty opaque section that I can later on go in with light and really blow it up. Adding some atmosphere and trying to separate things out from the background. I'm trying to also be pretty organized with the layers. I know I want to add colors later, so in order to make the process pretty smooth, I know I need to keep things organized, because otherwise it'd be very difficult to try and add colors over all of this and try to sculpt out the shapes and form. Because I want to add a lot of atmosphere, it's harder if you don't have the layers organized in the process. So before we start adding some color into the image, I want to share the different settings I'll be using because I think understanding these settings can really help you introduce color into your painting. And there's a lot of different ones which you can see on the right, but the ones I really like to use is color, overlay, and multiply. And for adding some bright highlights, I like to use color dodge as well. The benefit about using color, I'll be using a flat color and showing you the effect of them have. With color, it keeps your values pretty similar. It doesn't change much. That's why I like to use it early on in the painting, just to pop in some colors pretty quickly. Overlay, on the other hand, it starts really changing your values. And if that's the effect you're looking for, that's when you can start introducing it and pushing and pulling with that. Wherever you desire that effect, that's where I would use it. And multiply, that's when you get some really dark areas, and that's where I like to play with, most likely in the shadows, or if I would just want some darkness in the image. And whenever I want some brighter spots, some lights, or some really bright highlights, that's where color dodge really comes in handy to pop that out. And using a combination of overlay, multiply, and color dodge, you push and pull and just add wherever you feel like it works. The only consistent thing I personally like to use is to have color at the very beginning, just to establish some flat colors without changing with the values too much. So let's start adding colors, shall we? So the very first thing, I definitely want to get rid of the black and white. So I'm going in with just some color layers and just putting in some very flat shapes in and very opaque, just to add some color. And then I start playing around with overlay. I think the one thing that you always got to look out for when you start from black and white into color is that you can very easily have a very desaturated painting, but you think it's more saturated than it actually is. And it's because you start with no color as well, so slowly adding colors. You think you have some color, but you really don't. And it's a problem I ran in so many times. And the solution I found for that is simply adding like a bright color on your canvas, as you see in the top right corner. And that becomes, like, I call it color track. It gives me always something to look at and compare to make sure it's like, okay, that's what like a really bright and colorful color looks like. I don't want to go that far, but it gives my eyes something to compare to and always look towards and compare what I actually have on my canvas. Because I do want saturation in the painting, but not that far, but it gives me something to balance against. Also, I start reaching the point in the painting where I no longer use adjustments like overlay, color, or multiply, and I'm just going in actual painting with pure color. And I think that's a natural process of when adding black and white, for me, it's a certain point I want to get it to so I can eventually transition into the fact that I can just paint with pure colors. And some people, they really push the black and white almost near final and the colors like a secondary adjustment. That totally works. It's just very different workflows. I prefer working like this. And for this painting, of course, we need the rain. I really love rain in animes. The one on the left is referenced from Garden of Words. And what I always liked about anime rain, it's just straight down. It just keeps pouring. I guess it's because of animation reasons, a lot easier than it was diagonal, but it kind of has a nice aesthetic feeling to it. So I always like to do that. So I just draw a bunch of lines and I blur it. I ended up adding too much in this version. You're going to see me going back and tweak it. But that's how I personally like to draw rain, because I just love how they do it in a bunch of animes. And what I'm trying to do at this point, I really just want to add some more detail to the character in the foreground. Naturally, my background is as a background artist, so whenever I feel comfortable with the background, that's when I can focus more on things that are closer to us and in focus. Like the reflections on the ground, a bit more on the character itself. At the moment, it felt like there was a bit too intense reflection, so I'm going in and painting some of it out, bringing some wet spots in there from the rain, and just adding a bit more contrast there. And also, I ended up adding a bit of a gradient to the character, because I do want her to stand out, but she's standing out a bit too much at the moment. So I added like a dark gradient from below to up to make sure she blends in a bit more with the environment. But I feel like I'm getting close to wrapping up the painting. I hope there was something in here that can also help you whenever you want to add go from black and white into color, because it's a bit tricky. There's so many different ways you can do it. I encourage you to simply experiment. I hope some of this can help you as well in that journey. But I hope you enjoyed this video. There was so much fun making it. I really love to paint rainy scenes, so I kind of wanted an excuse to just paint one, but I had a lot of fun making it, so thanks again for watching. Have a wonderful day. Bye! Hey everyone, thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the episode and that there's something in it that can help you with your own paintings whenever you want to add color to a black and white painting. Let me know in the comment section below. I put up an episode each Friday, so be sure to subscribe. Have a wonderful weekend, and I'll see you next time. Bye!